capital budgeting video for hospitality financial performance. As you can tell from the dashboard, my APV at the end of my simulation ended up to be 559.97, which is very good for the simulation. When looking at this spreadsheet here, you can tell that my revenues were 245.75 at the very beginning, and at the end of the simulation I ended up with 320.5. My operation income was 22.6, and I ended up bringing it up to 35.66. My net income was 13.57, and I brought it up to 21.4. As you can see from the graph here, I did bring my actual numbers up higher than what was forecasted in the end. When looking at the spreadsheet here, this graph, you can tell that most of my revenue came from my retail, and then from my production, and the licensing was very little. When looking at the operations profit, you can tell that a lot of it was due to licensing and less to retail and production. Here with assets by division, a lot of my assets were used for production and retail, but less for licensing. Now we're going to look at our income statement and balance sheet. First, we are going to look at the company overall. And we're going to look at our earnings before taxes. Right here was the current, and by the time I was done with the simulation, I had brought it up all the way to 99.05 in the end, and net income I brought all the way up to 59.43. The assets went from 132.38 here all the way up to 244.22, and on the total net assets they went from $282.62 all the way up to 396.21. Our liabilities on stockholders' equity also went up in the end. It went from 282.62 all the way up to 396.21. That's just the company overall. Now let's look at our production. In our production, we also went and increased all of our production assets, and liabilities went up also, but not as much. Our assets went up very quickly from 73.03 all the way up to 163.03. And our liabilities went up very slowly from 41.05 all the way up to 72.45. Now let's look at our cash flow statement. Here we're going to look at our cash flow from operations, cash flow from investments, and then our cash flow from financing. Then eventually we will look at our ending cash balance. First, let's look at our cash flow from operations here. Our operations is where we would like to have most of our profit come from. In the end, we did have our operating to be 41.4, and the investments at negative 15.26, financing at negative 24.62, and in the end we had a positive cash flow balance of 14.19. This is good due to the fact that you do want to have it positive, saying that you do have cash flow coming in, and a positive number is always good. reasoning behind the ones that I picked and the reasoning behind everything that I was looking at during the numbers, pretty much. In this particular situation and simulation, I looked at mainly profit and at the PIs that were higher than 1. When looking at these, I decided to go with just profit. I kind of experimented with all of the simulations that I did. One at a time. I did ones that were specifically profit-wise, specifically looking at certain numbers, specifically looking at mainly just maybe budgeting 1 per year. In the long run, looking at profit for me ended up being the best situation and the higher APV at the very end. When doing this, I actually looked at our choices here and ended up deciding that these were the best ones for me. And doing that, as you can see here, you get updates. And looking at these updates, you can tell which ones did well and which ones did not. The profit, looking at profit, was pretty good, but in the end, it could have gone better. By looking at these, you can tell some of them did good, some of them did not. And that's my reasoning behind choosing the ones that I did and getting the APV that I have now.